Today's Byword Big Talk stems from a previous episode's rant and subsequent discussion. Today we talk the state of streaming. Plus, this week's Nerd Nightmare hits close to home and possibly causes us to reconsider our friend groups. Welcome into the brisk fall embrace of the Nerd Byword, the only podcast nerdy enough to compare high fantasy television series, yet cool enough to gritty with the best of them. Dave and I are here to discuss the state of streaming in today's Byword Big Talk, an episode idea that stemmed from my dear friend's stereotypical Germanic ire at the cancellation of his beloved Paper Girls. Look what you have wrought, Amazon. But first, Dave is going big time nerd in this week's... Speaking of stereotypes, chess?
Dude, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know what is in the water, and you will see that that pun is totally intended in just a moment. But, there have been a series of really strange cheating scandals that have been rocking various, let's call them professional groups. I don't want to say sports because it's really weird to talk about pro poker in sporting terms. Too much sitting around, perhaps. But this all started with probably the most famous story going around online in a long time, and that is that there has been a cheating allegation leveled against a chess pro. So we had Magnus Carlsen, who is a world chess champion, level accusations against fellow grandmaster Hans Niemann of cheating, basically saying that his quote-unquote over-the-board progress has been unusual. So he took a loss from Niemann at the Sinkfield Cup earlier this month, and then was supposed to play him again, and after just one move, he was like, forget it, I'm out, which is like unheard of in chess. And he said, Carlsen said, and I quote, he wasn't tense or even fully concentrating on the game in critical positions while outplaying me as black in a way I think only a handful of players can do. Now, the funny thing is here that Niemann has admitted to cheating in online chess at the ages of 12 and 16, but insists he has never cheated in over-the-board games. Now, what makes this even more fun is that we, of course, get an online conspiracy theory making the rounds all over social media that the cheating methodology may have been vibrating anal beads as a way of transmitting messages to Niemann, although there is no evidence of that yet. I swear I don't make these stories up, man. Now, the fun continues in a news story from NPR, where months of suspicion, according to NPR, erupted in full-throated fury at a professional fishing tournament in Ohio, where two anglers were caught with egg-shaped weights in their catch, an edge of more than 7 pounds. The championship prize money was reportedly at $29,000. And not to be outdone, Pro Poker got involved in this wave of cheating as well. According to a report from Kotaku, accusations of cheating in live games are quite the thing. No Sherlock. While chess is embroiled in the most peculiar of cheating allegations involving anal beads, apparently, it now seems the world of poker is having its turn. After an extraordinary moment in a live broadcast high-stakes cash game, people are accusing poker pro Robbie Jade Liu of somehow cheating to win a hand of worth $269,000. So I don't know what's in the water, man, but everybody is either cheating suddenly or everybody's suddenly being caught cheating. And let me tell you, of all of these accusations, the only one that erupted in fury apparently was the one involving fish, because you can find the video of them discovering the weights online, and I have never heard so much cursing besides talking to you about the some old X-Men comic books, or at a Little League baseball game. So, Chris, your take on this wave of cheating, which is just absolutely blowing my mind.
50 Shades of Fishing Sports, I guess. I don't know. This is wild. I saw this and I thought that you had like I saw you add this to the doc last night, and I was just like, maybe it's a typo. Maybe he's had a bit, one too many. But like, why are we talking about chess and fishing? Like, but yeah, this is absolutely crazy. I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. Pun fully intended. But yeah, this is absolutely nuts, man.
Yeah, and you wondering why do we talk about fishing and chess and poker? Well, poker, neither here nor there. But I love playing chess. Way to roll into the stereotype here of a nerd. And I've done a fair bit of fishing in my time, and so although I've never gone particularly competitive with either, it's just amazing to me the lengths that people will go to, for some prize money. Apparently, maybe the economy is struggling truly so badly now that we have to resort to putting weights in fish in order to fight inflation. I am not sure, but these stories continue to blow my mind. All right, Chris, what is your nerd news story this week?
Well, the hits just keep coming for David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery, and I do not mean that in a positive sense. WBD is now being sued for allegedly fudging the numbers with regards to the amount of HBO Max subscribers by about, 10 million. According to the Wrap, Collinsville Police Pension, you can't make this up, a shareholder of the company filed the class action suit alleging that the numbers were falsified, quote, by including as subscribers AT&T customers who had received bundled access to HBO Max but had not signed on to the service, end quote. At this point, you just can't help but laugh, Dave.
I don't know if I can laugh about this, man. I think on the one hand, we're probably going to have to fully acknowledge that a good deal of this alleged misconduct occurred before the merger. But let's not mince words here and say that there's been plenty of crap hitting the fan since the merger as well. And I don't think either leadership has really covered themselves in glory here or something. Warner needs to get their act together, man. It's just absolutely mind blowing how many missteps they've been making over the last few years. And it breaks my heart as a DC Comics fan because this is the company that has control over the cinematic futures of some of my favorite superheroes. So I don't know, man. I find this story deeply depressing.
It feels like at least the very length of our show's history over 2 years. You'd be hard pressed to find a positive news story when it comes to Warner Brothers. So this is just another hit that they've had to take, whether it's money grabbing on behalf of the police pension or what have you, or when certain things took place. At this point, they'd have to be desperate for some decent PR.
Yeah, or actually, just do something right for a change.
Yeah.
And then the decent PR will just come.
All right, that wraps up our nerd news segment for this week. When we come back from our first break, we're going to have a Byword Big Talk all about the state of streaming. Welcome back to this week's main entree. You know it as our Byword Big Talk. And as I previously stated, this kind of stemmed out of our previous discussion that, the news segment from a couple of weeks ago went into a good portion of our Big Talk allotted time because it was such a fascinating discussion that just happened organically. So we are going to talk the state of streaming right now. Everybody and their ex-mother-in-law has a streaming app. We have content out of the wazoo, but shows that are popular are being canceled and what have you. So we each have 3 big problems and 3 solutions. Now, they may or not be directly linked, but we're going to start with each of our 3 problems, and then we'll wrap up on a positive note, hopefully, with our solutions. So, Dave, what is the first big problem that you have with the state of streaming right now?
I think this is probably the hottest of hot takes, and I'm probably going to be in the minority with this complaint. However, I think that one of the big problems that streaming has created is the notion of binging. specifically when you're making a television series and then dropping all 8 or 10 episodes or whatever of this season on the same day. I think what's happening here is that it's created a situation where television series are literally blips on our radar rather than appointment television, I guess is what they used to call it, or something that gets discussed, at the water cooler, so to speak. Streaming shows are pretty short-lived in the collective consciousness. And I think that's a real problem. One of the reasons that shows in the past were able to last so very long on TV is because they were sort of constant companions. Hey, did you see that episode last night? Hey, I wonder where the story's going next. I mean, can you really imagine a show like Lost, for example, surviving for long in a streaming world when they just dropped the whole season? I think so much of what comes out never really truly enters the zeitgeist anymore, because it doesn't have a chance to. The people who are really excited about something, and I've been guilty of this myself, particularly with the first season of Netflix's Daredevil. We sit down and we just watch the whole thing in one sitting, and then you're like, okay, I'm done. I stayed up all night and watched this, and I'm going to take a nap, and then we never think about it again. We never really talk about it much. You don't connect with other people that are fans. I can't see any of the shows that are currently coming out developing, these rabid fan bases that we've seen in the past. When looking at the X-Files fandom, for example, or even the Farscape fandom, although that was a much smaller fandom, it was pretty rabid darn fandom, right? Because it stayed with you when you watched the show. And so now, where we kind of compress this down, that conversation, I think, isn't happening anymore. The speculation communally, the speculation of what might happen next, all of that is dumped in favor of instant gratification. That's one of the things I find exciting about the fact that Disney is not doing that on Disney Plus. I just watched the most recent She-Hulk episode as of this recording this morning, and I was, it was a constant companion. There's a new episode of She-Hulk. I better go ahead and check that out. I'm really excited to see what happens next, and that sort of mentality so often doesn't exist anymore with these streaming shows, and I think that is a huge misstep. It doesn't even, it's the best way to put it, man, it's like we keep dumping water on the house plant without letting the previous water have a chance to soak in. Just keep pouring it on, and we're kind of drowning the house plant. So I'm just not very happy with the binging model. I think it is to the great detriment of the shows being released, Chris.
When I think I even saw a news story come across my timeline that Netflix is considering moving to that model of a weekly release, and I think that's incredibly smart. And I totally agree with everything that you stated. And I'm very happy with the way Disney does things, both with Marvel and Star Wars. I felt like dropping 3 episodes of Andor was a bit too rich. I think it was a bit much, and I would have liked to split that out a little bit more.
2 would have been enough. I've seen double premieres. Yeah.
Kenobi was fine. That was right about the right fit. And I guess I get that you want to drive people to the app, but 3 was a bit too rich. While I enjoyed the show, but and I just said this in our news segment, but one of the things that Warner Brothers Discovery has kind of lucked into amidst all this mess is the HBO catalog of content. And you want to talk about something that is, whatever the 2022 equivalent of water cooler talk is, you've got it right now with House of the Dragon. And as much as I enjoy the show, I prefer, to compare the two. I think that The Rings of Power is a much better show in totality, but it is undeniable the amount of social media activity and gossip and having favorite characters and theories every Sunday night at 9:00, Twitter especially, is flooded with content all about this one show. And, there was speculation that we're going back to Westeros with the dismal, awful last season of Game of Thrones. Would people open themselves up to heading back to this property? And they absolutely are. House of the Dragon was the greatest premiere in the history of HBO Max. I think of maybe even of HBO in its entirety. And so that is something that they can easily rest on. And you have, similar programs as we've noted before with Succession and with, Westworld. And that is something that they continue to have, and it has given them success over and over and over again. And now you have companies like, Disney copying that, and now Netflix. Maybe the grass is indeed greener on the other side.
Maybe so, man. All right, what is your first big problem that you see with the current state of streaming?
I think the biggest problem is what brought us to the table here. What spawned this idea is you have popular shows that are prematurely canceled. You have people that buy into a show. Maybe they even binge the first season relatively quickly, just to fall in love with characters and storylines, and then it's abruptly canceled, and you're left wanting more, and you're desperate for another streaming platform or another network to pick it up, and with such a flooded market, it's very difficult to see where we go from here, because there's so much content out there that so many little shows that could are fallen by the wayside, and they're ravenously devoured by the gargantuan shows like Stranger Things or the Disney Plus shows or the HBO Max shows. So it's very, very difficult in today's market to have a show that's kind of like an indie hit, I guess.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge too that sometimes shows take a little while to find their footing. I would say Farscape, for example, which is one of my go-to examples of a show with a rabid fan base that really and loved the show passionately. It took at least a half a season to really start finding its rhythm. I'd argue maybe 3/4 of the first season is just them trying out different things and seeing what works and what doesn't. I would argue that something like The Next Generation probably needed at least 2 seasons, and by the time season 3 rolled around, it had figured out what it was, And a lot of these shows that get prematurely canceled never have the opportunity to try to find themselves, I guess, is the best way to put it. So that is definitely a big issue, Chris.
Yeah, a lot of people say the same about the American version of The Office, but I enjoyed a great deal of season 1, but season 2 is where it really finds its footing, and you'd be hard pressed to find the opportunity to say, well, wait, you have to wait until the second season, nowadays.
Yeah, that's right, man.
All right, so you're getting into the nitty gritty nerdy data right here, Dave, with your second problem.
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody's very clear on what it means to be a successful show in streaming. When you have, a network television show, then, we're talking eyeballs, and they have like, Nielsen, the company that, does all the rating stuff and all the calculations, and certain households get Nielsen boxes and all that stuff to, watch their viewing habits. And they extrapolate from that sort of a general feel of, how many people watched. But with streaming, although they might have clear numbers of how many people watch something, that doesn't necessarily translate into more money for the streaming company. In network TV, the more eyeballs you can say are on a given show, the more you can charge advertisers, the more revenue you make, and thereby the more you are inclined to keep a show around. But with streaming, that's just not the case, because for most of these, there are no advertisers, right? I mean, Hulu has a few ads, but that's not the primary way of how Hulu makes money. A good chunk of what they have on Hulu is network TV that's just then posted and streaming after it airs, right? So this is just like a secondary gravy train for the companies. But as far as primary income, that's not a thing. So you have subscriptions, right? And I think for a lot of these shows, no matter how many eyeballs you have on them, the thing that these companies are looking for is whether there is a subscription bump, right? And I think this is really counterintuitive in a lot of ways. I mean, we just talked about how, in my opinion at least, binging shows isn't very good for the longevity of the show. And because of that, it never enters the collective consciousness. A lot of shows don't, right? And so then people aren't like, oh, this show is really good, I'm going to subscribe to Netflix to watch it, right? That doesn't really happen, because all these shows are just blips on our radar. And so saying, "Ooh, more subscribers means more money, means that this is a successful show," I don't think is a fair metric. I mean, look at, for example, a real good recent example. As of our recording today, we have not received any news yet on if Netflix is planning on renewing Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Now, by every metric, this show has been super successful, right? It's being watched by enough people that it's been pretty consistently Netflix's top 10. Um, the critics absolutely adore it, so it's a critical darling. People are speaking very highly of it, and everybody is just like badgering Neil Gaiman on social media. Hey, has it been renewed? Hey, has it been renewed? Hey, has it been renewed? And Gaiman, being the honest dude that he is like, no, and I don't know, and I have no idea what they're looking for, you know. And at one point, I think he even pointed out that not binging it would be good because it keeps the numbers of people who are watching the show high over a lengthier period of time, and maybe that's something that Netflix is looking for. But we just have no real clear metric of what it takes to be a successful show for a streamer, and that's problematic because that is when you get shows like, let's say, The Sandman, struggling to get a season 2 renewal, when if this was a network TV show, this sucker probably would have been renewed for 2 seasons already. It's a critical darling, and people want more. But Netflix is sitting on their hands. And that's because they don't have a clear metric of what it means to be a successful show.
Yeah, I had immediately thought of that when you started this topic. You have to love Neil Gaiman for his open honesty, and they're like, "What can we do to help?" And he's just like, "I guess keep watching it." And he's very unclear himself as to what will be the final nail in the coffin to get that renewal. Um, I guess for me, I heard a couple of weeks ago that Netflix is looking towards like an ad-supported version, um, and trying to figure out other ways to bring in revenue. But I think they've done, Netflix in particular, not to bring it back to Stranger Things, but to bring it back to Stranger Things, is they've really done a good job of like merchandising this, and especially with the key demographic of Stranger Things being like preteens and teenagers. Um, kids love merch, and that's the one thing that they will drive to the store for. And so like I even go to Walmart and I see Stranger Things like clothing lines, and I think that's just a smart way to bring in revenue. And you're going to have to evolve with the times and figure out another way to bring in revenue like that and gauge success.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I think that has led to problems as well in the past. The merch thing. If you look at what happened with Cartoon Network, I think they got rid of several shows in the past that were really beloved just because they weren't selling enough action figures. And so again, what are you looking for in a TV show? Like what is your metric for success? If it's really action figures, you might want to tell the writers, and actors and stuff ahead of time, and it maybe make it a little something more Power Rangery, where every other episode they get a new Zord or something. Here's a new toy you can buy, right? But you just have to be very, very clear of what are you looking for from this television show. So the writers, the actors, everybody involved in making of the show can make a conscious decision to say, okay, we're going to lean into this, or we're going to lean into that, or we don't care what they want. We're just going to, stick with our artistic vision. But it's just so disingenuous to have a piece of art like the first season of The Sandman and then just sit there and say, oh, well, I'm not sure if we're going to renew this or not. Like, you must be reaping some kind of benefit from the success of the show. So why is it not enough? What is it you're looking for? And I don't think any of the streamers are very clear on what it is they're looking for. All right, Chris, what is your second big problem for the state of streaming today?
Well, it's the fact that everybody has a streaming service and not necessarily everybody needs one. With the giants like Netflix, HBO Max, and Netflix, of course, they have the staying power, but you have people, subscribers like Paramount Plus that are trying to stay afloat. and Peacock, with their deal. I think the biggest thing that draws me to Peacock is being able to watch the WWE pay-per-views for no additional cost. But at some point, we have crossed the threshold of just overly saturated into a flooded market. Um, I still, can't help but sit back and laugh when I heard that Discovery Plus was a thing, that BET Plus was a thing, that there are so many secondary and tertiary like channels that have their own streaming apps. Like it's too much. And you cannot ask the average American consumer to subscribe to such a boatload of apps. And something's got to give.
Yeah, the oversaturated market is easily one of the number one issues. It's become sort of, the marketing thing was basically cut the cord, right? I mean, you do your streaming stuff, you don't need cable anymore. You can get rid of the high cable bill, you pay a small monthly fee, and you got access to all this cool stuff. Oh, the olden days when Netflix was really the king of the hill, and you could find pretty much anything on a singular streaming service. It was pretty glorious, right? But at this point, if you added up all the various streamers, you're probably paying about as much as you would for a cable subscription. I don't think it is actually a money-saving effort anymore at this point. And the question also becomes, if you have a streamer that has like one or two big selling points and then everything else is basically meh, yeah, like what's the point, right? It almost seems like the easiest thing to do is just subscribe to a streamer, watch something you want to watch, and then unsubscribe.
Yep.
But that becomes a huge hassle as well at some point when you're having 6 or 8 streamers, right? So the whole thing has become extremely non-user friendly, I think.
Yeah, for the big reason, as I mentioned, watching the wrestling pay-per-views, but before that, when The Office left Netflix, like that was the biggest thing that, myself and my family watched. But then I found it on a Vudu deal to have the video on demand for the entire series for $30, and paying that one time, $30 fee, as opposed to paying $5 a month over X amount of months. It really wasn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man.
All right, Dave, what is your third and final problem in the state of streaming?
Okay, this is gonna be another hot take moment, so strap in. I lament the death of the filler episode. So basically, in network television shows that have to fill 22 or 24 episodes in a year, there are basically two types of episodes. The episode that advances the overall plot or story of the series or of the season, and then the quote-unquote filler episode, individual one-shot stories done in ones, right, that don't necessarily contribute to an overarching arc. I love filler episodes. I think they're oftentimes some of the best episodes that television series produce, especially when they become a little older. Like 2-3 seasons in, you start getting writers, directors, actors wanting to experiment with their characters a little bit, and they start doing really, really cool stuff. When I think of the X-Files, and some of the best stuff that the X-Files produced in its original run, I do not really think of the alien stuff at all. The big overarching series story of the conspiracy and in the government and the aliens, and that is not the stuff I think of. I think of, creature flicks, basically, mini horror episodes, things that are super memorable, like the episode Home, for example, or there was this black and white episode that was like a tribute sort of to old Frankenstein movies, where they come into this small town and they literally did the whole episode in black and white. And those sorts of episodes no longer exist in the age of streaming, because streaming is very lean, right? It's like, how many episodes do you need to tell your story? 6 episodes, 8 episodes? That seems to be about the limit sometimes, right? They don't even do really full half seasons anymore, as they used to be called, 12 or 13 episodes. And so everything is extremely lean and everything serves the overall story. And that's great to a certain extent because there is a difference between movies and TV. If I want something that is lean and every moment contributes to the larger story, then I will watch a movie. But if I want to spend a little bit more time with the characters and I want to get to know them, I want to see how they react in different situations, then I want television, or at least that's how it used to be. And so I think when a television series experiments a little bit, and they'd always do it in the filler episodes, and that's where a lot of fun is to be had. Um, one of my favorite Farscape episodes is a body swapping episode. Had nothing to do with the larger overarching story about, wormholes and stuff, but it's just a blast. And I think we killed the filler episode. And I know people call them filler episodes because they don't actually do anything with the bigger story and they're boring. And no, they're not. They're another way of interacting with these characters and seeing them go through different situations. Plus, I love a good done in one story. What is wrong with telling me a complete story in 42 or 45 minutes? I like a good one shot comic book too. I think it's a lost art almost at this point to just tell a story in 22 pages and move on with life instead of stretching it to 4 or 6 issues, or make it a 12 issue maxi story or something. So I miss filler episodes, and streaming is the most obvious culprit of what is killing filler episodes, Chris.
God, you're such a nerd.
I know I can't help myself.
Yeah, it's kind of what I love about what She-Hulk is doing, because Dave, what's the one thing that all the dude bros are waiting for in this series?
Oh, Daredevil, of course.
And the wink at the camera, the breaking, it's like this huge meta, like fourth wall break. It's like fourth wall upon fourth wall of just like, yeah, this is my show and I know why you're here and you're going to be completely dissatisfied. I love that they are stringing this out so much. Yeah, so my greatest observation over the past few years, particularly with like MCU content, is the rabid impatience of the American media. We have become so spoiled with content and media that we have absolutely zero patience. You can boil this down to something like if a web page takes longer than 10 seconds to load up, something is obviously wrong with the internet or our device, and we have to take it in for repair because there's no way that it could take this long to load, or there's no way that we would have to wait 7 or 8 episodes until the prominent male character shows up in a female-led series. How dare they? These kids were obviously not raised by dial-up internet. I can still hear the AOL sounds in my nightmares. It's hilarious to me how impatient we have become as a society.
And looking at She-Hulk, like the wedding episode is absolutely uproarious to me. I love the wedding episode.
So good. I loved it.
But it had absolutely diddly to do with squat.
Exactly.
And I absolutely love how she even said at the beginning of the episode, well, it's pretty inconvenient, right? But that's how weddings usually pop up. So, that's what I'm kind of talking about, is this sort of standalone episode that takes our main character or characters, puts them in an interesting situation. And by the end of the runtime, it's done and resolved and you move on, right? I miss those, man. I really do. And yes, I'm a giant nerd for that, perhaps. But man, you weren't there in the glory days of the X-Files. Everybody was talking about the alien stuff, and I was talking about the dude that could stretch himself and make himself real like skinny and like squeeze through tiny little holes so he could kill you and eat parts of you. That was my jam, man. Forget the alien conspiracy stuff. I wanted those little standalone monster features. That was what I was all about.
I would say that the She-Hulk, the most recent one, at least of this recording, is the one where she goes to Blonsky's like whatever retreat center, the meditation center. That was another great filler episode, and like another subversion of expectations. We've become so conditioned to just have our expectations fulfilled so much to where we could like plot what is going to come next, and foreshadowing is all but the most obvious thing. But I think it's done a really great job of that. While we're on that subject, though, I bet you really love that DS9 episode where they went back to like 1940s newspaper writing. and
Absolutely, I did.
it's such a great episode.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. One of my all-time favorite DS9 episodes is the baseball episode.
Oh yeah,
What does that have to do with Diddley Squat? Yeah, nothing. But it was a great episode and a great situation to put those characters in.
it's a great feature for the true star of the show, my guy Rom.
That's right.
I love Rom so much. Rom is my guy. Now that's nerdy. That's nerdy.
Yes, you too are a giant nerd, Chris. All right, so what is your last big problem that you think that this whole streaming world is facing?
This kind of could be tied into my previous one about the flooded market, but also Netflix keeps rising its cost for subscribers, and so rising cost of subscribers. Every app has gone up over the past calendar year. It's become more stringent on the wallet or pocketbook or Cash App or what have you, PayPal. But yeah, it's getting tougher and tougher out there, and Netflix has overextended themselves to the point where they're really cracking down about password sharing or what have you, or limiting screens. I rarely get to watch Netflix unless I make everybody go to bed early. So and you know what, this is another big takeaway from Zaslav taking over. HBO Max all of a sudden has a screen limit. So way to go, Zaslav. So yeah, the rising cost for subscribers and the way that they're really cracking down upon large families even is really stringent upon American consumers. And you've seen companies like YouTube go with things like YouTube TV or Hulu Plus Live TV to try and differentiate the market and offer different things to the audiences, but it's becoming tough. I mean, like Hulu Plus Live TV, I think it's like $60 a month. That is not cheap, and that doesn't even include things like Netflix or Disney Plus before you add those on there. So if there's particular program things, the MCU shows or the Star Wars shows that you're going to Disney Plus for, you got to add that to your Hulu subscription. I think YouTube TV is like $70 a month. It is not cheap.
Yeah, and there's a reason that I literally have an old-fashioned antenna hanging on my house, because I actually, use my antenna for local channels, and I just refuse to subscribe to Hulu or YouTube TV stuff to watch live TV. I mean, dude, for that we had cable. Like, the whole point of streaming was to not do that, right? Like to on demand, you watch it when you feel like it. So that seems really counterintuitive to me, those little add-ons. But yeah, the rising cost is absolutely ridiculous, man. And they're all going up. And what fascinates me to no end is that they say, yeah, it's, production cost. I mean, it costs a lot of money to make this content for you. Yeah, sure, blah, blah, blah. But then you keep like turning around and canceling the shows and having to start from scratch. One of the other reasons that television series can continue to run even though their ratings decline over time on network TV is because the overhead cost is eliminated, right? The costuming, a lot of the sets, they've already been built. If you have, for example, something like a Star Trek show, you have a standing set with the Enterprise. That's not cheap to make, right? And so you're not going to have usually a Star Trek show that you run for one season, then you're like, okay, we're done, and then you just tear down all the sets. Like, you didn't really recoup your investment, right? So, but I feel like the streamers feel a little inefficient sometimes, maybe. Like if you're going to make a show, you put up all the infrastructure to make that show. You make it for 8 episodes, and you're like, okay, that's canceled. Let's start from scratch with something different. Of course, cost is going to be high, but if you have a show that's fairly popular and you run it for 5-6 years, and you really make use of what you got there, that works much better. So yeah, I mean, part of that is, I think, just plain old inefficiency.
All right, Dave, enough of our griping and airing of grievances. Let's head to the positive side. We're looking for solutions now, and your first one is...
Well, I mean, we hinted at it earlier, but more streamers should use Disney's release model. They should release episodes one every week, the way network television did. And I don't mean to sound like an old grumpy guy when I say that, but it works. It keeps the television show more in the collective consciousness of our society. It creates water cooler moments. It builds suspense over time because you don't know what's going to happen next and you're excited to see what's next. I think it's just time for streamers to realize that television shows are, in fact, not movies. And they should not be, viewed in a singular sitting. The whole point of serialized storytelling is that it is, in fact, serialized. But so many streamers don't serialize. They just say, here it is. You can sit down and watch it as one big movie. And that's not what serialized storytelling is all about. So I guess you could say go old school and release them one at a time.
Yeah, I think it's beneficial for Disney and HBO Max. Like I said, I know exactly where I'm going to be at 9 o'clock every Sunday night. I know what I'm going to be doing first thing in the morning. I wake up early for work so I can watch the latest Disney Plus episodes, before I wake the kids up for school. I think it's a tried and true method that is a welcome change to the current trend.
Absolutely. So what is your first solution to fixing the current streaming issues?
So perhaps here's a hint at next week's episode, but I'm going to lean into my sports nerdery here. Most athletic contracts between athletes and their respective clubs or teams are typically negotiated, on year-long deals. So you could come with a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, guaranteed, or what have you, 3, 4, however long. And one of the strategies, I don't know how feasible this is or what have you, but like if you're coming, with a pitch for a show, I think I would hope that we could be like, listen, this is a 1-season story that I have, similar to what you have when you pitch like a comic book. Be like, listen, this is a 6-issue miniseries. This is a complete in totality series that I want to tell. I'm reading Ram V's The Many Deaths of Layla Starr right now from Boom Studios. It's an absolute masterpiece. That's a 6-issue miniseries, cut, dry, don't rinse, don't repeat. It's done. So maybe you have something agreed upon on the front end. And of course, sports teams can, terminate a contract, before it's time if the things are not met or if they're not playing up to performance, what have you. But like, I think we have to get some of those agreements on the front end somehow. And so you say, well, Chris, some of these people are, first-time directors or first-time showrunners or first-time directors. Then I'm trying to knock out 2 or 3 problems with one. We have so many freaking streaming apps. We need to morph some of these apps into like a minor league system, where if a show, like they do with like the EPL, and like if a show does well, it gets promoted, and if a show does not do well, it gets either canceled or relegated to like one of the minor streaming sources. But like we can't just have these shows that have longer form storytelling in their sites and they're just canceled after 1 season and we're all just left wanting. We've got to be able to figure this out in a way that's satisfying for all parties involved. So, here I have a show that is, 2 seasons. And if we do well, then I can, go more on that. Or if I have a 3-season series or what have you. And if you, get an agreement on like a lower, or lower thing. I think Supergirl did this. It premiered on CBS. It didn't get quite the numbers they wanted, so they moved it to their minor league system of the CW. So more of that, because I'm just trying to wrap my brain around a solution to this, Paper Girls or Lovecraft Country or Utopia situation where we have popular shows that are getting canceled way before their complete story is told.
Even if they would just include in a basic standard contract, hey, we're giving you 8-episode first season, but if we cancel you, we're required to give you, a 2-hour wrap-up movie so you can finish your storytelling. Yes. I think that hurts a lot of shows these days too, is when they don't have a clear ending. They used to send shows into syndication, right? And now it sits on streaming forever. Right, so anybody can come along and be like, "Hey, this show from 4 or 5 years ago on Netflix, I've never seen before. It looks interesting." And then they watch 8 episodes and they're like, "Where's the rest?" I don't think it's any incentive for a back catalog to be a selling point for people to be like, "Hey, Netflix has a really cool back catalog of stuff that they've made in years past, but hey, it's all incomplete, right? You're never going to get a finished story if you watch it. But if you go in and you at least try to have some kind of closure for people, then that becomes something that people are much more willing to watch on the front end, right? And then it becomes a selling point. Hey, we're the streaming service that leaves no plot threads dangling. We always finish our stories. You can trust us. You can invest in us. If there's a new show you're interested in, subscribe. You're gonna get a complete show, even if it's just a 2-hour wrap-up movie after season 1.
All right, that leads quite beautifully into your second solution, I believe.
Yes, and that's just a clear path to complete storytelling. There is nothing from like the writer in me hates nothing more than seeing a story sit there incomplete, right? And I know that oftentimes things don't work out the way you want them to, and you can't have your epic 10-season run to tell your story, but oftentimes you can at least wrap it up. And again, I will point to, Farscape, which, originally the cancellation broke my heart. The Sci-Fi Channel had announced that they had picked up Farscape for 2 more seasons, but apparently there was like some kind of option in there that they didn't have to take the second one if they didn't want to. And the whole production team made the finale of the first of those 2 seasons with the belief that they're getting another season, and then boom, suddenly they were canceled. And then it took a couple of years to get the financing together, but they came back and they said, okay, well, we can't do a whole season, but we can do a mini series. We can do like a 3-episode mini series or something, and we can wrap up this story. We compress some stuff down, we move some things around. Sure, we have to drop a few things, but at least the story will be complete for the fans. And it just irks me. It irks me to no extent when it's unbelievable to me when I watch something and I'm invested in it, and then it gets cut off before it can finish its story. Every piece of me, everything inside of me just rankles against that. It just bugs me. It makes me want to. I did not watch the Sci-Fi Channel for probably 10 years after Farscape was canceled. I just refused. I was like, Sci-Fi can kiss my butt. I don't care what they're putting out. I'm not watching anything that Sci-Fi is putting out. They canceled Farscape. Like that's the sort of vindictive guy I get when it comes to incomplete storytelling. So I think these streamers need to provide a clear path. If your show doesn't hit, this is how you get to wrap up your story. If your show is a hit, this is what we can do. Even if they say, every show needs to take the Buffy the Vampire Slayer approach. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, kind of coined the phrase "big bad," right? Each season had its own villain, and that villain was overcome by the end of the season. There was some kind of finality there, and then the next season was sort of a fresh start. It felt complete. Any season really could have been the last season, and it would have worked. And I think maybe that's what we need to do, but something needs to be put in place that allows for a sense of completion. Of closure with the characters that people fall in love with, no matter what form that takes.
New nerd byword drinking game. Every time Dave says the word Farscape, take a shot. Please don't be operating any motor vehicles while you're listening to these episodes.
I'm telling you, alcohol poisoning may be possible.
We need a content warning.
I'll be sure to put one on this episode then.
No, I'm right there with you. I think maybe this is just the new normal, and maybe the solution is, as creators, you just start writing 1 season, wrap ups, storylines, because what's the solution? You don't go to a library into a book series and you open the jacket cover of the book and it says, warning, this book is incomplete, this story does not wrap up. Like,
although in fairness, that's probably what's going to happen to Game of Thrones, right? I mean, it's just going to say, in the first book, warning, if you read this, the last book was never written by George R.R. Martin. Like that's where we're cruising, I think, is pretty clear.
Come on, George.
He can do it.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, so what is your next solution?
Well, I'm really pleasantly pleased with the Disney bundle, and I think with such a flooded market when it comes to streaming apps, is we're going to have like an a la carte menu of select, app groupings or what have you. So something like the Disney bundles, so where it is not absolutely crippling. I've seen Paramount Plus do something like this. I think that Viacom owns Showtime or something like that, so you can get Paramount Plus and Showtime, which who's really clamoring for Showtime, but nonetheless, they're doing something. So, HBO Max and Discovery Plus, who needs Discovery Plus? But nonetheless, it's something. It's growth. But yeah, we've got to figure out a way to cut costs for consumers because with the rising cost of inflation, and not to turn this into an NPR podcast, but people are struggling, and you can't get everything.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I also think it would be interesting, as a way of drawing in more audience members, to kind of have the streaming place be like the premier place, but then like what is to stop, for example, Disney from putting like Obi-Wan Kenobi on TV? Let's say 6 months after it was on Disney Plus, right? And then and then they can say like, hey, if you subscribe to Disney Plus, you can get a lot of this kind of stuff with your subscription, right? And that can be also another measurement of how I'm back on the metrics. I'm sorry, man. That could be another way of how you measure how a show is successful, right? So you have your streaming numbers, and then you slap it on TV, and you see how many people actually want to watch it. You get the ad revenue from airing it on TV, and then you could say, hey, this show is drawing in more subscribers because we actually put it in front of some people, and now they want more, right? But there has to be more, right? So you can't just have like a one-off season there. But hey, I'm getting ahead of myself there.
Well, and I think something that we need to really take into consideration, and I meant to mention this earlier, is that there are still large swaths of at least American consumers that are not overtly streamers. There are still plenty of people who have not cut the cord. There are still plenty of American homes that still have either cable or DirecTV or what have you. Is Dish Network still a thing? I don't know. Probably not.
I think so.
Oh, okay. Well, so there's still plenty of people who still have their standard, television packages, and so if you're looking to create content, you don't want to negate that or completely dismiss that. And so, send some of these streamers that have no business having a streaming app, Discovery Plus, back to network television. All right, Dave, what is your final solution? That sounds bad. That sounds really bad. The final solution. What is your third solution?
My third solution is that seasons need to expand again. I think there is something nice about a quick shot of television that is like 6 hours long or something, and is telling, a fast-paced, coherent story. But how many episodes is She-Hulk supposed to be? Like 9 episodes or something. So that. For a show that is basically like almost structured like a sitcom or something, 22-minute episode lengths, right? Roughly speaking, you could almost air this like a sitcom on television. It feels like there's just not enough She-Hulk there.
What I mean? 9 episodes is what we're gonna have. So we only have 2 more at this point.
Jeez, you know what I mean though? Now imagine if we would have had, let's say 22 half-hour episodes, which is the equivalent of like 11-hour-long episodes or something, right? That feels a little more like there's more to be done there. You can have some filler episodes to expand on the characters. You can take your time with world building. I just think that maybe our seasons have gotten too short. In our quest for brevity, I guess we're just making it almost too fast. We're getting closer and closer to a television series just basically being an overlong movie. Oh, here's a show. It's four episodes that are 50 minutes each. Yeah, well, it takes almost that long to watch the first Star Wars. So congratulations, you made a movie, not a TV show. And so, my whole complaint about the filler episode just comes back to there isn't a lot of real estate to experiment within the format. And that's what's missing, is just give these shows a few more episodes. You've also probably noticed, if you look at the Disney Plus shows, for example, that oftentimes the endings feel a little rushed. That is also because there's not enough real estate there. If you are demanding a show be 6 or 8 episodes long, it's very, very hard to do TV in that time frame. Let's give it 12, give it 15, give it some more time. And so that's one of my biggest problems with streaming. It's just that there isn't enough there. I want to immerse myself in a world. I want to spend a lot of time with these characters. I just got to know Miss Marvel, and suddenly she's gone. And next time I'm going to see her is probably going to be on the big screen. It just defeats the purpose of what long form serialized storytelling is supposed to be. So give these people some more episodes to tell their stories, people.
And I think that's one of the biggest praises that we had when Daredevil Born Again was announced, that it was like 22 episodes. So that's something I'm looking forward to, but I'm right there with you. It feels, even with the success and how much I've enjoyed the Disney Plus shows, the MCU shows in particular, seems just like a conveyor belt at this point, and we just churn one out after the other, and it's become so processional. And by the time I really start digging into a program, it is wrapping it up, and more often than not, unfortunately, in unsuccessful fashion. I think that you've had be hard pressed to find more than 2 or 3 that have wrapped up well. I'm excited to see that Loki is confirmed to have a second season. I'm excited to see the misadventures of that cast and crew to continue. I think we have confirmed Ms. Marvel a second season, and it's all but confirmed for She-Hulk. So I am excited that they're going to get second seasons. I would like to see more in those seasons, though.
See, that's the other thing too. Like a lot of those shows now for Disney Plus in particular, I think those shows are just, like you said, conveyor belts, but they are conveying the audience to the theater. Right? They all seem like overlong advertisements. Look, here's a new character. You want to see Miss Marvel again? Watch the Marvels. You want to see She-Hulk again? She'll probably pop up in the next Avengers movie, right? Like, it feels like they're just pushing us towards, come and spend more money after you gave us money to stream these shows. If you want to see these characters again, you better come to the theater and spend more money. It's just, I know it's all a business, that's definitely not the point. But to me, television series have always been something distinctively different in their storytelling approach than movies. And the blending of them that Disney is doing, and the blending of them in general that all the streamers are doing by reducing episode counts and making this very, very tight, narratively continuous things, is so different from what television shows are supposed to be. And so I just miss TV shows, man. Something that feels like a TV show. All right, Chris, your last solution.
Well, my biggest thing is, from the streaming companies' perspective, is to make more cost-effective decisions rather than punishing the consumers and your customers and your clientele for irresponsible fiscal decisions that you made. I'm talking about you, Netflix, backing up the Brinks truck to Adam Sandler to make the same freaking movie with a different wig and a mustache every single 6 months or whatever. Yeah, so make more cost-effective decisions so we're not left to pay the punishment for your irresponsibility. Paying $20 million to an individual like Dave Chappelle just to make apologies for him and have to go through that PR nightmare. So just be smart about it and stop overextending yourself. And Netflix is probably the most egregious and the most noteworthy when it comes to exorbitant spending, and now the time has come to fit the bill, and they're all of a sudden looking at introducing ad supported versions and limiting screens and going after the nefarious password sharers and so get your house in order, Netflix, mostly you.
I have to admit that I had milk coming out of my nose laughing so hard when I saw your note in our doc, stop giving Adam Sandler a blank check. And I wasn't even drinking milk at the time, so that was pretty impressive, Chris. But yeah, I think that's probably a good point. They seem to be spending a lot of money on stuff that is questionable at best. I can't say that any of Adam Sandler's recent output leading up to his Netflix deal had been all that good. And then the Netflix output itself was not all that good either. So I'm kind of just wondering what was up with that deal. Like, it doesn't seem like you really bought.
Who did they make this for?
Exactly for Adam Sandler.
for
He
for 8-year-olds from 1994?
Yeah, it seems it's just very, very odd situation. So yeah, I don't think they're necessarily always smart with that sweet, sweet subscriber money that they get.
All right, that wraps up our Byword Big Talk on the state of streaming. What are your problems? What are your solutions? Hit us up on social media at Nerd Byword on Twitter and Instagram. But when we come back from this, our final break, we descend into madness. We are here once more for the October final segment known as And let me pass this hot potato over to you, Dave.
Oh. I'm looking forward to talking about this one. So we're talking this week about The Descent, a 2005 British horror film written and directed by Neil Marshall. The movie stars Natalie Mendoza, Shauna MacDonald, Alex Reed, Maina Buring, Nora Jane Noon, and Saskia Mulder. And it is a cool little flick, guys. So here is the tagline from Google. A year after a severe emotional trauma, Sarah goes to North Carolina to spend some time exploring caves with her friends. After descending underground, the women find strange cave paintings and evidence of an earlier expedition, then learn they are not alone. Underground predators inhabit the crevices, and they have a taste for human flesh. So I could talk at length about this and set the stage, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and dump our audience cold into your reactions, and then I'll try to give it some context. So jump on in, Chris. What was your take on The Descent?
Well, first and foremost, it was truly disorienting to find out that the film was actually filmed in the UK, because it actually looks like, North Carolina, which is not too far of a drive for us. So I swear, I was like, I feel like I've driven past this place many a time. Um, yeah, so here's just some observations. Um, Shauna McDonald's character, I believe her name is Sarah, has to be the most
Yes.
clueless woman. How do you not know your husband is cheating on you? Because everybody's significant other and best friend have those longing looks after one another once they get out of the Whitewater Rapids. Like, he forgot which one he was married to for a second. Like, girl, you are so clueless. And then she dips right after the funeral and may not have even shown up to the funeral. Like, and then like a year later they're bullying you into going into this unknown cave. Come on, choose your friends better. God. I feel like, and I had to do some background research because my suspicions were correct. Directed and written by Neil Marshall, who's written some good stuff and directed some good stuff before, but this is very much 2005 dudes writing chicks. I think one of the little X-ray view things said that the production team nicknamed the film "Chicks with Picks." Like, it's pretty cringy when it comes to what like men think women do. In the absence of men, like how women interact with one another. Of course, one was cheating on another one with the husband. Of course, this is what they get down to, and they all have these infighting. It's like, Mean Girls Underground. Like, come on. So aside from that, it was pretty scary and anxiety inducing. My claustrophobia was kicking in. I'm very glad to reaffirm myself as an introvert, and all the thrill seekers who have to just get the next big high going and making you go out and do things can kick rocks. Extroverts are so annoying. So I thought that the design of the crawlers, I believe that they are called, was
Yes.
pretty generic, nothing out of the ordinary. I saw, like, in the trivia bits as I was watching, that there was some heavy influences and callbacks to things like Journey to the Center of the Earth, Nosferatu, things of that nature. So that was pretty interesting. The one girl that died, also, I was kind of rooting for Juno. Like, Girl, the guy, I guess he got held accountable in the affair and everything because he got whacked, within the first 5 minutes. That was pretty extreme. But like at the same time, she was, a pretty good baddie. Also, she was hot, so maybe I was, um, a bit skewed in my rooting interests there for Juno. Um, but girl like snuck up on her after she had just killed a crawler and was surprised when she went through the neck. Like, you can't be that surprised. Like, why in the world would you not be like, hey, Juno, it's me sneaking up behind you in complete silence while you're holding a pick? Come on, girl. You deserve that. Not really, but just seriously. Um, I see what they were going for with Sarah's journey as like going from this I'm in PTSD, I'm having bad dreams about my daughter's birthday cake, and then she's at the window, um, and then her spiritual self, you know, journey is like now she gets to kill her husband's mistress slash her best friend at the end of this. But it left me a little bit wanting. The ending was spectacular when I think that Juno's like body that sits in the car next to her.
We need to talk more about the ending here in just a second. Yeah.
And yes, and then I saw the extended cut where it's all a dream, and so that was pretty cool. Um, my biggest observation is how in the hell did they make a second one?
Yeah, I have many observations. Are you ready for me to jump in?
Let's hit it. Let's hit it. Justice for Juno.
Okay, so I will say that I saw this in theaters when it came out in 2005, and I absolutely adored this. In a dark theater, this sucker jump started my claustrophobia out of the wazoo. And the tension between the characters, the fact that it actually was trying to say something, even if it's even in its clunky early 2000s-ness, really spoke to me. I absolutely adore the fact that they actually tried to do a movie with an all-female cast for the most part, right? All the main characters were women. That was pretty unusual for this time period, especially in the horror genre. So I was like, immediately like set up and paid attention because of that. What I adore about this movie is how it just really gets into your head, especially if you're watching it in the dark. I will freely admit this is one of the few movies that I saw in theaters that actually gave me the heebie-jeebies afterwards. I remember leaving afterwards and telling my wife, "I'm never going into a cave system. Just never. Just never. Just don't even think about it. No caves for me ever again." And I've kind of stuck to that since. So, the conflict between Sarah and Juno was really interesting to me because it's easy to look at Juno as the villain, but I think that's really an oversimplification of the story, right? So part of me was rooting for Juno, and part of me thought, holy crap, dude, you're a really despicable person. So it's you're kind of two minds of the character, and that kind of complexity is also pretty rare in horror movies. I think you've noticed by now, watching a lot of these horror movies, that you get a lot of one-dimensional, stereotypical cannon fodder characters, right? And so seeing that kind of complexity was a lot of fun too. Now, for the ending, so the way the ending plays out for the listeners who have not seen the movie. And if you have not seen the movie, what are you doing listening to this? Pause this, go watch the movie, and come back for our discussion of the ending. We'll still be here, okay? We're not going anywhere. But the way the ending plays out is, you have Sarah and you have Juno left. And Sarah, hurts Juno. I think she like messes with her knee or something, like pickaxe in the leg or something, and then leaves her there and crawls out of the cave system. And the assumption is that Juno's dead. And then Sarah gets into her car, and then you see, like, I guess the ghostly spirit of Juno sitting next to her in the car, and she screams, and that's the ending that American audiences got. The original ending that was actually released in the UK and how it was filmed is what you saw, Chris, as the extended cut, right? Which is that all of that, her climbing out of the cave, was all just a vision, a dream, or whatnot. And she's laying in that cave system, and she's gonna get eaten too. And then it fades to black. Apparently, the people who were releasing, the studio that was releasing the movie, in the United States thought that ending was too bleak and asked that it be cut off sooner. So then you'd ask the question about the sequel. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the claim that the sequel is far inferior to the original. But the way the sequel plays out is it picks up with the original ending, the extended ending, only Sarah actually manages to pick herself up and crawl out of the cave, is found, and has no recollection of what happens. And so they play the amnesia angle. And another friend of Juno's, who apparently is not friends with Sarah, decides to enlist Sarah to go back in that cave system and see if Juno survived too. And that's basically the sequel. Yeah. So the amnesia angle didn't work very well. They abandoned the whole, close-knit female friends thing. It's, a co-ed cast this time. A lot of the stuff that makes the first one so interesting, gets abandoned. And so is there a lot of dudes riding chicks, as you said, in this movie? Absolutely. But it's such a cool effort for the time period of 2005. And it was such a cool effort for the horror genre too, which is just so unusual to do what they did with this movie. And it does have some really genuinely creepy stuff going on in it. And it really messes with your claustrophobia if you're watching it in a dark room. I just have to commend this movie. I've always really enjoyed it. And I fairly frequently rewatch it for the creep factor.
I neglected to mention in my initial rant, shouts to the absolute queen, Mayanna Buring, who shows up as Sam, I believe, in this film. You know her best as Tissaia DeVries in The Witcher, who is Yennefer's teacher in the first season. Also, I'm very glad to hear you have similar thoughts about caving and spelunking. And I was glad to see in my research that it was not in fact film here, because I was truly, I wasn't overly scared, but I was a little bit, I stayed up and, it was 11:30 last night when I finished it. I stayed up, played some Madden to decompress.
And that's what happens when you watch a real. That's what happens when you watch a real horror movie. You're never able to go to bed right afterwards. You always have to spend a little time doing more bright and shiny things first.
Yeah, so if you ever get the notion that we will ever go caving or anything like that together, I'm going to kick your ass. So.
I have absolutely no interest. Like you, I'm generally a pretty introverted guy.
Yep.
And extroverts are truly, truly exhausting.
I will watch about it, read about it, never do it myself.
That seems fair. The only thing, now that I think about it, that really, people have affairs and it takes two to tango, and you can't just lay all that on Juno. But the one thing that always did in this movie really rubbed me the wrong way is when she just makes the executive decision to take the whole group in an unexplored area.
Oh yeah.
Of the cave, and I'm like,
and leave the book behind. Yeah.
You jerk.
Yeah.
You absolute jerk. You didn't even check with anybody if they're okay with that. You just made the executive decision that you were going to do that.
Oh, that was another thing. Everybody was saying it's a tourist trap. It's a tourist trap. You're tourists.
Yeah, go to the tourist trap as a tourist. That's okay. It's absolutely fine.
Also, probably the biggest WTF moment was, I believe her name was Holly, who is booking it through there. And how did that end up for you?
Not well. Yeah, it's a good movie, I think, and I'm glad it gave you a little bit of a creep factor. I don't think we've creeped you out enough this year.
No, but next week, rest assured, we will. All right, that wraps up Nerd Nightmare and a complete episode of the Nerd Byword. We thank you so much for coming along this journey with us. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Amazon Music, or our very own website, nerdbyword.com.
And of course, find us on social media. You can find us at Nerd by Word on Twitter and Instagram, or individually at That Nerd Dave and at That Nerd Chris. We'd love to hear more about your take on the current streaming landscape, and of course, what you thought of the 2005 flick The Descent. And don't forget to check our link tree, which is of course linked in our social media profiles, where you can find all sorts of cool stuff like a link to our Discord and merch.
And join us next week where we ask the question, does everything truly float down here? And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Chris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.